Now, billions of naira is lost in Nigeria's civil service because of weak manpower development. That's according to Kabir Usman, the Director General of the Center for Manpower Development in Nigeria. Earlier, CNBC Africa's Wale Famurewa caught up with Kabir Usman at the World Economic Forum for Africa and started by asking about the role that the CMD plays in manpower development in Nigeria.
CMD means Center for Management Development. It is a government agency that was established in 1973, and it was then anchored by a council. The council enabled us to regulate, quality and the standard of management education in Nigeria, with a view to ensure that there are, policies in place and also development plans in terms of the manpower requirements for the country.
Right.
So as far as we are concerned for Center for Management Development, we are there to set benchmarks, set standards, and raise capacity and capability of Nigerian workforce, not only the public sector, but also the private sector.
All right, let's talk about the public sector, and can you just give us some perspective on what you're doing in the public sector?
Well, currently what we are doing is we are working with federal government, primarily the federal government agencies, ministries, departments, and agencies, to try to look at aspect of leadership, an aspect of management, an aspect of administration, as well as risk assessment, risk management, and economic management. And we do conduct, training need assessment in order to identify skill gaps and skill shortages, in the country, with a view, to provide training programs and also empower other management development consultants and management development institutions in order to provide the same capacity building.
Right. And as you do this, from your experience, what would you say are the major gaps in terms of the manpower, skilled manpower in Nigeria, and the greatest training needs? Well,
as you know, certainly training is not one of those that is being really favored by the budgetary process. So certainly it leaves some of the civil servants working for about 10 to 15 years without embarking on any training. And the world is globalized, issues about essential skills, issues about life skills, and issues about globalization, typical example ICT,
yeah,
and other areas in terms of efficiency and productivity, which simply means we need to look at various courses that are going to empower the civil servants so that they become productive in what they do. Typical example is about performance management system. Is lacking. We need to have contracts so that there is performance contract, targeting on goals, and targeting also the target that need to be achieved. And this must be underpinned by key performance indicators.
Right.
And in another context as well, of course, as primarily we are dealing with the public sector. There are issues, about targets, and there are issues, about benchmarking, and there are issues about continuous, professional development. So we have to make sure that we meet those kind of challenges. When we conduct some bit of assessment, we have discovered that, people do not have the prerequisite knowledge in terms of result-based monitoring and evaluation. There are projects, there are policies, there are programs delivered, but they need to be monitored so that we can see the impact and the outcomes and value for money.
Right. Many people will look at, especially the public sector today, and the way it's run in Nigeria. Like you've highlighted, there are a lot of inefficiencies because of the quality of the manpower and the training that manpower has received. Your thoughts about the cost of that?
Yes.
What has been the cost, the economic cost to this country?
Well, the economic cost, typical example, I can give you one example of time management. If you look at the public sector, and you discover that we lose about 40 billion a year, in terms of loss of man hour, simply because of lack of punctuality. Yes, lack of punctuality, lack of attendance, and lunch break, very long discussion, on the phone, and social media, and the rest of it. And certainly that is not good to anyone. So typical example, if we can improve in terms of time management, that can really save a lot, actually in the country. And there are many of them. Only about 20 to 25%, you see, of the civil servants are ICT ready. Certainly, it simply means in that area you can see lots of productivities. We are still pushing files while we are actually, of course, in the 21st century.
Right. One imagines that for us to really leapfrog, the cost is going to be enormous. But I imagine that the the resources are also very scarce at the moment.
Yes.
Your thoughts about the priorities, if we're to prioritize training in the civil service today,
yes.
where do you think the focus should be?
Well, we said the focus should be on leadership and focus in terms of...
But I'm looking at the individuals now.
Yes,
the individuals that need it the
in
most.
terms of the individuals, we have to empower them.
I guess it should start
so
from
that,
the top,
yes,
right?
yes, it has to come, from the top. And the issue of training, as you know, if there isn't sufficient funding, as you rightly said, when there is a budgetary process, the funding of training is the one that is being hit first. So possibly because there is lack of national training policy, which we need to be put in place, to make sure these things are done. And it is the responsibility of every organization to make sure that they train their staff. And in also another context, you will see that administrative skills, are also lacking, and the managerial skills are also lacking. And of course, lack of adequate resources, lack of power, is also contributing to lack of productivity, and so many other, interrelated, predicaments that is prevailing in the economy. So that is why it is absolutely essential, for us to embark on performance in the management system, issues about project management, issues about budgeting and planning, accountability, value reorientation, and the rest of it. And we are focusing, on the policymakers. There are specific programs targeting them, and the lawmakers and decision makers, as well. Unless this is done, no matter whatever plans we have put in place, the implementation plan and the vision of the country, it is just going to be a mirage, except and unless we go back into human capital development.